Good evening. I'm Richard Hackle. On behalf of the Chebeague Island Historic Society, I welcome and thank you for joining us on Zoom for the Historical Society's Ellsworth Miller Memorial Lecture Series established by Cap Leonard. The Board of Trustees offers sincere thanks to Cap for his continued support of the lecture series. Those who wish to support the efforts of the Historical Society may donate online at chebeaguehistory.com. But before beginning the lecture, I wish to acknowledge and honor the indigenous people who were first to inhabit Chebeague, forage its fields and forests, and fish its waters. This evening's program, Rehabilitating and Sharing Grannell Cottage 1987 to 2023, is presented to us by Andy Grannell.
Thanks to Mary Holt for her timely prompts in preparing for this evening and getting the flyer out, and to Richard for his support here to Solid. To begin, our 12 acres are here on this map up on North Road, just before, shall we say, the borrow pit on the right, across from the Merrills, is a 12-acre dedicated piece dedicated to open space. So, and bisecting our property running down through to the shore is the Juniper Ledge Road. 12 acres that have been stewarded by 5 Hamilton generations and now 5 Grannell generations, stretching back to the American Revolution. So here, in brief, is a snapshot of these 6 generations. Grannell's running back to the 1770s and Hamilton's back to the first settlements on Chebeague. From 1914 to 1927, our founder, George M. Cottage. Dad remembered the native peoples who were still encamped and traded near the stone wharf. They served then and they serve now as a reminder that we can choose to live not so much on a Puritan-owned island called Recompense, but rather on a Wabanaki summer retreat that they named Chebeague. Blessedly, in my opinion, they chose to name the island in recognition of an essential island resource, clean fresh water. Chebeague is indeed an island of many springs. And in all the world, there's only one island that is named Chebeague or could ever be named Chebeague. So may we learn what they knew, that in the end, nobody can truly own this treasured island. However, as this island's current legatees, we can act as its caretakers. Now, the primary source frozen text is my recently published 135-page study entitled Our Labor of Love, a chronology of projects and events, 1950 to 2022. This study brings our most recent 35-year era front and center, but it also works to embed that era into the preceding 110-year history by providing an index that reflects future shareholders. If put to good use, it just might make us smarter. In short, this is a history meant to not only be enjoyed, but put to work. Here, waiting for the parade at the parting of the ways on North Road, 1996, are from the left, Ed Kihanya, Jack Mulholland, John Whitaker, his parents, and Whitaker, Beth Mulholland, Dorothy, Anna Whitaker, and Jimmy. Now, skip ahead 9 years later. Here we are again at the parting of the ways, and it looks like this tradition is going to be well established. So here in the summer of 2005, celebrating in the inimitable Chebeague style, are Kathy back here with the flag, Andy, Anna, Kim, Colin, and Jimmy. Here we go, Jimmy. Here is our two nurses, Jan Grannell Whitaker and Beth Grannell Mulholland. They're here in the kitchen at Grannell Cottage, washing the dishes and no doubt catching up on, enjoying a good catch-up chat. In June of 2006, at the annual meeting of the Historical Society, offered a slideshow presentation entitled Grannell Cottage Discoveries. And here is a short list of those discoveries. 1, an 1860 diary kept by Charles Andrew Grannell, discovered by my father behind a mirror, one of the greatest finds of his life. A copy of a eulogy for Sarah Weldon Grannell, 1859, written by the pastor of the Shebeg Methodist Church. A birth, marriage, death copy of the children and family and children of Delaney and Sarah Grannell. The Grannell and Sawyer papers. They're cover the years 1814 to 1906 in the Maine Historical Society. And I'll skip ahead. Margaret Grannell's wedding dress from 1861, which still exists in the care of the North Yarmouth Historical Society. Fanny Grannell Chase's album, 1870 to 1900, with penciled in notations for each of the photographs. We are indeed rich beyond belief. The Discovery team that made the presentation is here, my sister Kathy and sister Jan. We've just emerged from the Methodist Church in June 2006. Now, 2002, 20 of us gathered to celebrate Richard Arthur Grannell's 70th birthday, which of course featured a large lobster dinner. Dick is centered here in the center of a circle. He was a pastor for 25 years in 4 different locations, New Hampshire, Maine, Florida, and was the beloved. A year later, Dick passed away with cancer of the throat. This study maintains a steady focus on our rehabbing projects, but it also contains photos of the family celebrations, the reunions, the holidays. These are offered to remind us that this is why we do the work. A copy of the book is on deposit at the museum. Again, Our Labor of Love, the Cottage, 1950-2022. So on this evening, you're invited to pull alongside of us as we, the shareholders and supporters, continue to navigate the challenges and all the while continue to enjoy our well-functioning home. In 1985, we began with this question: could we learn to operate on a firm legal and business footing while at the same time function as a cooperative? Cooperative here is acting democratically and in the spirit of one for all and all for one. With this question remaining to be worked out, we formed Grannell Cottage of Great Shebeg Island, Maine, Incorporated. Before all 7 of us signed on, we discussed the usefulness, implications of each of the bylaws. From the outset, we recognized that these bylaws carried with them both an opportunity and a self-imposed. To the extent that we value this initial democratic charter, then to that same extent, it has helped us to succeed. If we continue to treat this guide with respect, then it can evolve to meet changing needs. Here then is the first page of the bylaws. from 1987. Now, I want to try to speak to the cooperative spirit that we strive to remember and work with. This is a notebook I saw posted in a store in Exeter, New Hampshire, and I'll quote from it liberally. In this house, we laugh a lot. We try our best. We're patient. Well, most of the time. We always hug. We tell the truth. We make mistakes. We say, I'm sorry. We give second chances. We keep our promises. We always forgive. We never give up. We often are real. We do love. Yes, we are family. As I say, that author is unknown, but I do think that speaks to our ambition to work within a cooperative spirit. Recently, we recognized the need to make a needed generational shift in leadership. First, we spent a year planning, then 2 years implementing. And as a result, we have us elected to serve for a set term, not for, 30 years. Second, we are meeting 4 times a year rather than just 2, which in turn keeps us better informed. Third, we're working under advisement with an experienced lawyer. Fourth, we're defining and carrying out our priority projects. And finally, fifth, we have scanned and made searchable our 37 years of vital records. So here is our current president, Dan Kihanya, up here, the upper left, standing beside Bruce, his brother, sister-in-law, Karen. Here in the center is Catherine Grannell Kihanya. She was one of the original incorporators. She's also the author of Thus Far on the Way, 50 Years on the Color Line. On the left is Kihanya. In front, Michael, son Michael Kihanya, daughter Lily Kihanya, who, by the way, is in Kisumu, Kenya this evening, studying at a health center, a student at Pomona College in California. And here on the right is Ed Kihanya. To understand what we inherited in 1987, I invite you on a tour preceding very distinctly different Grannell Cottage eras. The first is the original family home and farmstead, 1878 to 1902. Second came the boarding house and cottage era, 1903 to 35. Third came a family home in decline for nearly 40 years. Fourth came the salvage and purchase era, an intense 16-year period. And then finally, the reduction in 1987 to the present. So let's get started. The family home and farmstead era. The family home is here depicted in this photograph. Standing in front are Etta and Andrew, in back his sister-in-law and their 3 children. Here, the home stands alone, and later it would be recognized as the original of what would be 3 distinctly different sections of the other sections are the dining room wing, built in 1901, and the kitchen wing, built in 1918. These sections will be identified and explored later. For the next 24 years, however, from 78 to 1902, this original 7-room home would serve this family well. Now, if you look sharp here, standing here in front is our grandfather, Arthur Lyman Grannell. Standing next to his father, Charles Andrew Grannell. And it was Charles Andrew was both the general contractor and one of the 2 carpenters that built this house. Our thanks go to state historian Earl Shuttlesworth, who offered this stereopticon photo to Donna Miller Damon, who in turn, with Beverly Johnson, drove up North Road one evening, sat at the roads, and Tessie could identify the home in this photo. It might seem obvious now, but at the time, it took an active imagination to conjure up this house as Grannell Cottage. In the end, this one photo not only captures this still young family, but also the pride and the joy that they have in their spanking new home. Now, Charles Andrew kept a journal, an account book from 1957, and he hired out at least part-time to a carpenter, Ed Ross, and he kept track of his bricks, the lumber, the windows, and everything being purchased. In the summer of 2014, the great-grandson of Andrews, Hans Grannell, donated the journal to the museum. And this is a gift that will keep on giving. So here on the back lawn of Grannell Cottage, 2016, are the descendants of Philip Norman and Elizabeth Grannell. Philip Norman Grannell was our father, George Andrews' youngest brother. Hans and Susan Boudreau are standing on the back left. They've been spending, Hans and Susan and the extended family have been spending a week or two every summer for 15 years. Through rental payments, they're financial contributions, not critical at points, and we are grateful for their contribution. Here, sitting on this stoop, is in a recently identified photo is Hans's and Steve, Peter, and Jim's father, Philip Norman Grannell, sitting on the stoop of a store in Quebec Center in the late 1930s. Phil certainly looks like he's right at home. Doesn't he? Oh, she said, he's pretty handsome. And I said, yeah, those Grannell boys got better looking as they went along. Phil was a wonderful chap and died far, far too young. Now, back to the construction of the house. The house took 130 hours, and of that, Andrew logged in 60% roughly of those hours. The total cost was $836, which translates as $23,000 in today's terms. It appears that all these charges were paid out of pocket, and if that's so, this speaks to the savings stemming from having rented with Edda's parents and helping with farm chores for 12 years, 1865 to 1877. Now, another source was the recent sale of land, and for sure, it's a testimony to Andrew's 15 years of service as a cook on several of the big family homes. This is probably a familiar site for you. It's the David and Mary Weber Hamilton Saltwater Farm. This photo comes from about 1919. This is the home and saltwater farm of Edda's parents. And from 1865 until 1887, it served as the first home for Andrew and Edda. Here's the pocket diary. If we can get this. This is the title page of Andrew's 1860 diary, which he kept faithfully throughout that year, hardly missed a day. From April to November, or for 35 weeks, he served on the stone sloop Newcomb. And they averaged 2 freights per week, taking grout and stone into the build out of what is now Commercial Street. I'm trying to get the per freight average was 35 tons. I don't quite understand that. However, what is clear, times were good, and Andrew purchased 2 house lots in Ferry Village. This is a lithograph of a photograph done originally in 1865. It's the portrait of Charles Andrew Grannell. Andrew spent the winter of 58 in South Portland, then Cape Elizabeth. And from his journal entries, we learn that Andrew was suffering from an undiagnosed disease. By spring, however, he rejoiced that he was well enough to sail down to Quebec to begin planting potatoes. There are other indications that he suffered from a chronic condition, namely that he remained a cook on the stone sloops and did not progress, as most others did, up the ranks to becoming mate and captain. What we do know is the Italian physician Leon cited chronic nephritis or kidney disease as the cause of death at age 65, June 4, 1902. Following Andrew's death, Etta commissioned a lithograph of the original likely wedding photograph. She then had the lithograph framed and designated a place of honor in the new dining room. There she had it hung, and yes, to this very day, 151 years later, that is where you'll find it. I'm going to point here at the end of the table. On top of that shelf is the lithograph photograph of Andrew. The Grannell Cottage boarding era began in 1903 and extended through 1935. Andrew's concluding contribution was the construction of the second, or the dining room wing. And with the 19-foot by 15-foot dining room, an open porch for the rockers and hammocks, and a pantry with plenty of cabinets, now making it possible, Sadie and Etta began making plans for opening up a summer boarding inn, or in the parlance of that era, Sadie would name it Grannell Cottage. As her nephew George would soon learn, Sadie was one smart and determined lady, having recently been appointed assistant postmaster, contacting reporters for the summer tourist newspaper, the Casco Bay Breeze, and then she hired photographers to create illustrative postcards. Thus resulted in publishing the following advertisement. Grannell Cottage, Quebec, Maine, situated on the north side of the island where the cool breezes ever blow in the summer, near the pine and the fir groves. A quiet, comfortable boarding house where a limited number of guests can be accommodated. We can supply the best of everything for our table and give our guests the best of satisfaction, as our references will show. No better place on the bay to spend your vacation. Terms, $6 to $8 a week. From 1903 to 1936, Grannell Cottage hosted 937 guests. Roughly 1/3 were repeat guests. And over these 33 years, the number of guests averaged 31. However, 7 years of teens, beginning 1911 through 1917, Grannell Cottage averaged 40 guests. And so likely the profits from these 7 summers helped make it possible to construct the third, or kitchen wing. Now here, with the back view of the house, the kitchen wing, and here, this is the kitchen wing that has just now been constructed in 1901. Standing over here on the right, the summer kitchen, before the 1918 kitchen was constructed. The summer kitchen was torn down in the summer of 1975. Postcards, mailing labels, framed portraits like this were the popular means of advertising. The U.S. Postal Service and soon the rise of the telephone were essential tools in managing a summer boarding house. Spending her work days at Quebec's new post office, and visitors. Doubtless, this gave Sadie a distinct competitive advantage. Here's the mailing label that Sadie had drawn up. So right from the arrival of her first guest, Peter Macaulay, a 24-year-old Nova Scotian, July 18th, 1903, Sadie kept close track of her guests and, of course, their mailing address. Are as rich in their research implications as the Grannell Cottage guest book, 1903, 1938. This guest book is now safely in the care of the Shebeg Museum. Here's a copy of the register for the year 1924. And one of the guests is Quincy. See if we can find Quincy here. Quincy Kirby. This is a photograph of Etta Gregg Hamilton, born 11th of August, 1945, died 23rd of August, 1925, 80 years old. On several seasons, the owner of the Boston Theater, Quincy Kilby, along with his wife, Frances Barrett Kilby, daughter, Barbara Kilby Phillips, chose to return to Grannell Cottage. Like others, they became friends. So it was fitting when Etta died at Grannell Cottage, August 23rd, 1925, that Quincy would honor Etta with the following 3-stanza poem, entitled simply Mother. 80 years, then rest. Rest with the knowledge of labor well done, trials encountered and victory won. Doing forever her best, 80 years, and then rest. Forever our oar. Fears, disappointments assail her no more. Fear and anxieties cease. 80 years, and then light. Doubts disappear when the daylight is born. Perfect enlightenment follows the morn. Shadows have fled with the night. 80 years, and then light. Only 6 years later, on May the 4th, 1831, the New York Times offered this obituary for Quincy Kilby. Quincy was a poet, a playwright, and an actor, and a raconteur who seemingly had an inexhaustible fund of anecdotes about the world's famed personages. He died today. Now, wouldn't you have loved to just had an evening on the porch at Grannell Cottage and listen to Quincy share his stories about the rich and famous? For sure, Sadie didn't have to worry about anything when he was in the house. Now, here's a happier time, 15 years earlier. This is August the 11th, 1910. We're out on the front lawn to celebrate Etta Hamilton Grannell's 65th birthday. Standing on left here is Arthur, son Arthur, alongside Sadie and Jenny. And then here seated is Etta's son-in-law, East Grannell. And seated in her lap is our father, grandfather, great-grandfather, George Andrew Grannell, age 1 year and 2 days. Standing here next is Marion, Etta, this is Louise, and son Morris. So now we move ahead. Family home declined Mary Grannell, son Charles Carl Grannell, from the years roughly 1838-1970. Standing in front of the guest cabin, one that was built 9 years earlier, is Carl, his mother Jenny, Aunt Sadie. The little visitor here in front is Thomas Eugene Phelps, born 1929 and death in 2006. He was the son of Robert and Marion Grannell Phelps. year 1931, and if so, that same summer was the one in which Sadie was busy making major plumbing improvements, and Carl undertook a demanding project to end the need to use the ancient outhouse. With the Depression now beating down hard, brother Arthur Lyman Grannell, then living in Ridlandville or Mexico, Maine, reported in his diary that despite these realities, that Sadie is having an electric pump installed with water and also a hot water boiler connected to the stove. Carl dug out and walled 2 cesspools in the lower orchard, unquote. After the expense involved for these critical improvements, there's likely no money to hire a backhoe. Even for those accustomed, this was one tough dig. First, it required digging a 50-foot long, 3-foot deep trench, and only then came the hard part. Imagine, if you will, digging out not 2 foot, but 10 feet deep cylindrical holes and rocking them up. If there is any need to provide evidence of Carl's willingness, this would be it. Carl was willing to do whatever it took to provide for his mother and his aunt. In addition to operating a water taxi and a summer touring operation, Carl was also a small-scale restaurant entrepreneur. And over the years, he created and managed businesses both on the side street adjacent to House Wharf, and also on the front end of the Stone Wharf on Shebeg. First, he purchased and operated as Captain Carl on his touring taxi boat, the Roma. Later, at the Custom House Wharf in Portland, he managed Grannell's Crab Shop. Then, during the Second World War, Carl managed a restaurant on that same wharf. His final restaurant, Carl's Lunch, was located at the end of Shebeg Stone Wharf. Here, Carl sandwiches, subs, and ice cream. Here, then in this photo, Carl is preparing his building to be removed from Stone Wharf and towed up North Road, where he had it placed in the backyard of Grannell Cottage. We inherited the decaying building, and there in the 70s, it served as a fun hangout for our kids. The serving counter of Charles's Lunch now serves as our project tool bench in the outbuilding we call the barn. So all along, for 4 long decades, it fell to Carl, and Carl alone, to either do the repairs himself or hire someone to keep Grannell Cottage in repair. And as we'll see, he tried. This is a photograph of the bench in the barn, which is the former serving bench from Carl's Lunch. All right, moving to the ownership of Grannell Cottage, 1970, 1987. Now, well into his 60s and increasingly losing his eyesight, thus his ability to drive his car, Carl is sitting on the well cap, engaged in an earnest conversation with George Grannell. See if I can make this a little bit full width so you can see this a little bit better. There's Carl sitting on the well cap, and here's Dad engaging him in an earnest conversation. This is our Uncle Hubert Thurston, and quite clearly is frustrated with the conversation. This conversation took place in the early 60s. Immediately following his retirement in 1972 from the Oxford Paper Company in Rumford, Dad made frequent visits to Grannell Cottage to explore options with Carl. But it would not be long before Carl gave Dad his 50% share. Every caretaker. Here, clearly in retrospect, I'm going to go full width here again. This is the low point, as you can see. Here, standing in front, is David Kihanya, Bruce Kihanya, Dad, and Dan in a sea of grass with a porch in a very precarious situation and with little. So this is the low point. Despite the challenges, Dad and Mom made an offer to buy out his brothers and sisters for a total assessed value of $18,000. Some readily agreed, others were reluctant. However, finally, the turning point came in 1974. The question of ownership began moving in a more hopeful direction. And then came one immense gift. Dad's brother, Mars Alton Grannell, bequeathed Dad $10,000, or translated into today's terms, $63,000. So Dad sprang into action. He hired Robert Hodgson, a Rumford-based contractor, to take all measures necessary to salvage the house. This included tearing off that front porch, the back summer kitchen, and secure the cellar. Following the summer of 1975, the work of rescuing Grannell Cottage would now require summer projects for each of the next 10 summers, and we became an annual work camp. So here's Dad's retirement photo. We always say he graduated from Oxford. And he had a dream, beginning 1970, of restoring Grannell Cottage to his former high-functioning and sparkling state. From his retirement in 72 until his passing in 87, he doggedly pursued his dream. During one of the stories we love best, to borrow Robert McCloskey, the story begins with young George arriving at the kitchen door, breathless with excitement, and announcing to his beloved grandmother, Greg, that he had found and picked a mess of blueberries. In response, Greg, now smiling and admiring the deep blues in the can, asked, "Why, George, wherever did you find them?" Dad spoke right up and he said, "Well, why, I found them a good patch up in the cemetery." Now frowning and clearly upset, Greg ordered, "George," right then with one toss, all those blueberries went flying out of the door. Sternly, Greg ordered, "I don't want you picking anything in that cemetery. Do you understand me?" Young George did not understand, but nonetheless glumly shook his head in agreement. Every time Dad told the story, we waited for that moment when the blueberries went airborne. In Dad's eyes, we could see his look of utter disbelief as those berries sailed out the kitchen door. Later, just one more superstition. And yes, they were taken very seriously. So, any of you want to go picking in the blueberries in that cemetery? Rehabbing, our era, moving right along. Technically, our rehabbing era begins in 87. But throughout the first 15 years, that is until 2002, the original five shareholders were, at best, making products were on hold. Here's, thanks to Sister Beth, is a photograph of the five of us, I believe 1993. And from birth order, left, Dick, Jan, Andy, Kathy, and Beth. The major exception to tackling major projects came in 1990. That year, we connected the artesian well to a newly installed hot and cold water piping system. Earlier in the summer of 85, Dad hired Hanson to dig an artesian well. Hanson drilled to the depth of 220 feet before he got a flow rate that he thought workable, 2 gallons a minute. And then he inserted a 93-foot steel casing. The cost, $3,415, $9,118 in today's terms. And all of this was covered by an earlier sale of a 1.3-acre triangular lot to Mark Whitaker in return for $5,000. Digging the 100-foot by 3-foot trench, we hired Beverly Johnson to install the pressure tank and a submersible Burke's pump. And for the first time in 20 years, we had clear, clean water and plenty of it. In the summer of 2002, all attention was focused on reshingling the roof. It had an exceptionally steep pitch, 5 gables, 3 chimneys, 2 dormers, 10 valleys. Fortunately, we had one experienced roofer and Steve Grannell, an experienced assistant in John Whitaker. They were ably assisted by Steve's son, Phil. The rest of us served as the cleanup and recycle team. The entire cost of that roof, $3,400, now in today's terms, $5,400. And all of that was covered by a gift from Ollie and Dan Kianya. Here is the house, 20 years later, the house, the roof line's still looking great. We're fortunate that we only use the home seasonally. That's why we ages out, main asphalt shingles. Our bylaws allowed us the opportunity to expand from 5 to 12. And in 2000, we set to work. By July 4th, we had expanded to 11. With Diane Maxud, we would soon be 12. We were now poised to begin serious rehabbing. And here, in the summary form, are the projects we tackled over the next 15 years. Electrical upgrade to 200 amps. Installed a shower. We tore out a section of the front living room, put in new joists, supports, and insulated. We reshingled the west side roof. We put covers on the septic tanks. We replaced all 24 of the windows over a 3 or 4 year period. We removed some trees. We repaired a section of the chimney. We rewired the entire house in 2015. The garage. We purchased a new electric range and refrigerator, and then finally we had a survey for a land swap. We funded each of these projects on a pay-as-you-go basis with timely assists of short-term loans. We were careful to stay within budget, and we were able to combine the financing with our own skilled and volunteer efforts. Now, a special note. This is Steve Grannell and his family, Craig, Karen, Cassie, this is Rachel. Now here is 3 generations of Grannell. Phil, proud Papa, Steve, and this is Wyatt Stephen Grannell, January 22nd, 2020. No one has made a contribution to quite literally save Grannell Cottage like that of Stephen Philip Grannell. In addition to leading the way on re-roofing in 2002, when we discovered a major structural beam needed, we tore out and replaced a 20-foot vertical support post on the rear corner of the kitchen wing. And later he jacked up and replaced the beam fronting the dining room and deck. Additionally, Steve and his team have shored up and replaced beams for the back cabin and barn. And recently they jacked up and replaced the beams and footings for the garage. So here are on the square swinging doors, making it possible for us to house our Subaru over the winter. Here is the beginning list of projects undertaken between 2005 and 2018. And I'm going to just list 1 or 2, but please do come back to these as you're able. I think probably the most critical was that in the summer of 2009, Andy and a neighbor, Tom Hahn, cut out 6 decayed floor joists in the living room and adjacent hallway. They then replaced flooring. Then we solved the mold problem. For an additional $565, Tom had it covered the ceiling of the cellar with a Dow Tough R insulation that features a shiny foil shield. When the rising moisture from the cool and damp cellar hits the foil, it forms droplets, and then in time the drops fall back to the floor. As a result, our former battles with the mold have been eliminated. The 4 joists themselves cost $761. The cost for Tom's services, $1,325. Total, just a little under $2,000. Tom was gifted with an intuitive ability to quickly summon up and coming up several practical remedies, not just one or two, several. And we stood poles apart. Tom and I did politically, but we stood shoulder to shoulder on all matters practical. I'm going to skip this section here. He also installed a shower, a toilet, connecting washers. Here's the washer and dryer. Then once we had the living room in good shape, it was a team of Joel and Gretchen Pastor, Jack and Beth Mulholland, Michael and Megan Pogorzinski, who transformed both the living room and the front bedroom. Once the children were in bed and working late, they stripped off the wall, repaired plaster, and applied 2 coats of paint. Navigating several challenges, Joel and Michael ran the wiring and installed central lighting and fan fixtures. Now, take a look. That's the living room in a restored manner. 2022. Central light, central fan, and comfortable. Had traditional look, and yet everything is comfortable. Here's the team that did it. This is Jonathan, the pastors, and their 7 children. Wonderful crowd. Here is now, as we move toward the end, we decided that we needed to get rid of the original clapboards, replace them with hardy plank. Hardy plank combines Portland cement, sand, cellulose wood fiber, and other elements. It's truly a remarkable product. Here, in the last 2 summers, reclapboarding projects for the summers of 22 and 23. Here's Steve, Cassie, flushing off the old alignment, the tie bar wrap, and beginning to reclapboard. Okay. So I'm going to skip here to the conclusion, and I want to read this poem. See if I can get rid of this character. This is a poem by Catherine Grannell Kihanya entitled 151. Reaching out to us again, she rises from the springtime haze, framed by the blue skies, doused in dappled sunlight, fanned by rippling poplars. She flings out her annual greeting and assuring us that all is well. Hello. She's elderly now, 145 years. One life, many lives. Farm family, summer lodging venture, gathering place at the intersection of generations. Honor. Her accessories are board to washing machine, from icebox to refrigerator, from 6 rooms to 12. And her people too, from the freckled to the multi-hued, and from Hamilton and Grannell to Whitaker, Mulholland, Kihanya, yep, and still Grannell. Yes, she's been renewed, new windows, new shingles, new paint. Even so, her integrity is not disguised, full of stuff, but still herself, heritage. Listen, hymn singing, lobsters cracking, and floors creaking. Here, watch with her eyes, bicycles rolling, butterflies wafting, children running, adults crying, men and women cooking. Hearken. Inhale with her nose, lilacs, blueberry pie, ocean breezes, salty towels, and pure air. Hold dear. Commingled sensations of decades and centuries. Harmony. This land is our belonging place. On the island, at the top of the hill, before the church and after the crossroad, inland from Uncle John's Point, near the wild blueberries, exists a haven where we are centered and whole and connected. I knew I wouldn't get through this easily. Thank you, Kathy, for a great poem. And connected to family, home. Okay. Finally, the desert reached. This heartwarming view of Grannell Cottage says it all. On the outside, the restored home is cast in a moonlit shadow, and on the inside, it's softly aglow. This rare moment in time was captured by Kyle Grannell. Thank you, Kyle. And here's Kyle, the photographer, at work. And here, finally, are just a collection of memories. Okay, so let's now to comments and corrections. I'm sure there's going to be some corrections. Thanks. Richard, would you read anything you see that's coming up? I'm going to unmute you.
Thank you, Andy. Yes, I need to
Okay.
unmute. Yes, here we go. Yes, thank you, Andy. And if you can unshare your screen, we'll have a bigger screen for everybody. If you can find that button there on the bottom bar. But meanwhile, if anybody has a question, you can either type it in the chat box or just unmute yourself and go ahead and ask or raise your hand.
I see Beth. Go ahead, Beth, unmute.
I just wanted to say thank you to my big brother for doing a wonderful presentation.
Oh,
Thank you.
You're welcome. Big hugs.
Hugs to you too.
Anybody else? It's hard for me to see the whole screen. So if anybody wants to just pipe in, go right ahead.
Okay, this is Donna. I'll just pipe in. This is wonderful. Thank you, Andy, and thank you to your whole family. And I think this is, I was talking to Beth McNulty today, telling her about this. And if anyone's ever read The Big House, which is a book, and I can't remember the name of the author, it talks about a house and what does a family do when they get to the point where so many of them own it. And this is such a wonderful model because we've all had family homes on Shebig that have just gone to rack and ruin because people couldn't figure out how to go forward and how to keep it going. But they didn't want to give it up. And I remember a house that was my great grandmother's, and a cousin in California said, you can take the girl out of Maine, but you can't take Maine out of the girl, and someday I'll come back. And then she died, and the house, but eventually they did decide, and somebody bought it and they fixed it up. But what this family has done, and as Andy said, they go back to the very beginning, because when the first Grannell came, he married a Hamilton, and there's everybody's so intertwined. But it goes back to part of the mission statement for the Historical Society. It's instilling a sense of place. And boy, does this story have a sense of place. So thank you all to all of your extended family. And thank you.
Donna, thank you. Almost all of what we understand about our family's history begins when we asked you to come up to the house and please explain to us what we had. And when you looked at particularly the 1860 journal, we instantaneously understood that we were privileged, that we had something very, very special. So thank you.
Well, and one thing that you didn't, you had some other things too, but you also have some of the earliest records, or the earliest records of the Shebig Methodist Church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that is, just the family's connection to the church, the religion, and going forward in your generation is just amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. We inherited a tradition of Wesleyan Methodism that pretty close to Puritanism, isn't it? And it's view of the universe, and that carried on to Shebig. So we were glad to be part of a church family, and it was important, and it continues to be important.
I see a raised hand from Barbara Carroll, if you'd like to join in.
Hi. Hello. This has been great. I'm here with Phil. He's got something to say as well, because he's rarely at a loss for something to say. But I do want you to know that Hudson is here and he's been listening intently throughout the entire presentation, and he's really wondering why there's no one across the street to throw a ball for him. But
Oh,
I just want to thank you. I've just really enjoyed this presentation. We love all the work that you put into the cottage. And when Jane showed us our home, looking across the street at the Grannell cottage really sealed the deal for us. I was like, okay, that's the house I would like to look out the window and see. So keep it up. Thank you. And Phil.
Yeah, I just want to second what Barbara said. When we first came here, we looked across the street and there's that beautiful house, and as the morning goes by, I don't look over and wonder why Andy isn't over there working on it. I have to say though, usually when you move in next door to a house, you meet a family, but not 6, 7, 8, 9 families like we have there, and it's wonderful. There's a parade of Grannells that march through there every summer, and we've loved getting to know them, and they have been very generous with our dog. And found out that there is no number of times they can throw a ball and satisfy him, but they have a great sense of humor about it. So, Andy, thank you for everything. You're one of the best neighbors we ever had.
great. Let's see, Kathy, you have your hand raised.
Yes. I wanted to thank the Historical Society for thinking that our story is important enough. It is a story that makes me proud. And I thank Andy not only for his presentation tonight, but his leadership on making this happen. Hello, Shebag. Good night, Shebag.
Thank you.
Kathy, you're a big part of this, very big.
Okay. Well, we can, we'll if anybody has any questions, but otherwise, I think we've had a wonderful presentation from Andy. We really appreciate it. It was really went extremely well. And thanks so much for everybody, and thanks to everybody for joining in this evening. This was a great discussion. And guess what? Next month, we'll have another lecture on Zoom on Monday, November 27th at 7 p.m. And that's going to be presented by Earl Shuttleworth on a century of Portland artists, 1820 to 1920. Earl is the 6th Maine state historian. So that's it for the evening. Thanks everybody for signing in, joining up, and participating. And thank you, Andy, again for such a wonderful presentation. So I guess we'll be signing off. Thanks, everybody. And
Thanks, Andy.
we'll see you next.
Hey,
Thanks, Andy.
thank you.